in the Gaza area is increasing. In the paper this morning, Sally Gregg from Wellington has written about the Hamas Charter. Now, those in the know will know all about it, and those like me who are not in the know, it was news to me. To find out more about it, Robert Patman from the Otago University joins us. Good morning to you, Robert.
Oh, good morning, Owen.
It is old news, this charter.
Oh, yes. Hamas have presented themselves for a long time as being the most militant opposition to what they see as the expansion of the Israeli state. And by doing that, they call, amongst other things, for the destruction of the Israeli state. They do not recognize the existence of the Israeli state. But that has to be put in some sort of context. That position that Hamas have taken, that they don't recognize, is to some extent reflects the view of at least one section of the Hamas leadership that the negotiation route has not worked, and that the likes of the moderate authority, the PLO-led authority, led by Mahmoud Abbas, has not yet delivered on the negotiating front. And they believe that Israel is more likely to negotiate if it's presented with pressure. And we've seen that in the recent conflict. So, to some extent, that is in their charter, but the recent statements by the Hamas leadership said they are quite prepared to live side by side with Israel, providing Israel returns to the 1967 borders. Well, at least the leadership implied that, because they said if the occupation ends, and the occupation always refers to the West Bank territory, which Israel, under international law, has illegally occupied since 1967, the 67 war, and also it returns, and also, although it's disengaged from Gaza after occupying it for about 2 decades after the 67 war, or more than 2 decades actually, it still has Gaza under a virtual state of siege. It controls its airspace. It controls many of its borders, as does Egypt. So Egypt is also cooperates in the siege against the Gaza Strip. For these reasons, they still regard themselves under occupation, because they don't even have a 12-mile exclusive zone along their coast where they can undertake fishing in a completely unimpeded fashion. So, to some extent, yes, there are elements in the Hamas that do not recognize Israel, but it also reflects a sense of they do not see their aspirations for self-determination being met. If Israel was seen to be more responsive on the political front, that might undercut those elements within Hamas which are making such extreme demands. And there are certainly elements in the Hamas leadership which are pragmatic and are prepared to do business with Israel if Israel is seen to move on the aspiration of Palestinian self-determination.
Is it a case of never the twain will meet?
Well, I don't think you can ever say never in politics. At the moment, it's looking highly improbable. One of the reasons is there's such a huge military imbalance between Israel and its neighbours. I mean, this is not a match of equals. Israel has the economic and military support of the United States, about $3.5 billion worth a year, and the Palestinians don't have statehood, and they don't. Although the United States does give support to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and assist them with humanitarian aid, it doesn't match anything like the Israelis are getting.
It's interesting to note that some of the Arab countries are behind Israel on this, though.
Oh yes, there's great hostility to Hamas, although there's considerable support for the aspiration of Palestinian self-determination. Virtually every Arab country, even those which are hostile to Hamas, support the idea that the Palestinians should have their own state. Many countries in the Arab world, including Saudi Arabia, which is a close ally of the United States, including Egypt, which has been a close ally and continues to receive something like $1 billion a year in military and economic aid from the United States, continues to argue that the Palestinians should have their own state, and that the only solution to this friction between the Israelis and the Palestinians is to give the Palestinians a stake in the in the international order.
Where, how, and why? What will the United Nations do about this? Because at the moment,
the United Nations cannot. It's been marginalised, and a reoccurring theme of the 21st century is that you have a 20th century organisation trying to deal with conflict in the 21st century.
So they're out of the equation altogether, basically.
Well, while you have countries you have the permanent 5 members of the United Nations wielding the veto, none of them are going to sign up to a solution to an international problem, whether it be in Gaza, Syria, Iraq, or the Ukraine, which is not seen to be in line with their own interests. In other words, the partisan interests of great power are undermining the prospect of an international solution to burning problems, such as the Arab-Israeli problem or the conflict in the Ukraine. And we have to deal with that reality at the moment. The UN is going to remain sidelined until it's reformed to reflect the realities of power today.
Okay. Israel is giving the Palestinians a bloody nose at the moment. Will Israel recover from the worldwide condemnation?
Clearly, I think there will be some reduction of, if you like, denunciation or condemnation of what many people see as a disproportionate response to the provocation by the Hamas government, Hamas leadership, that is launching rockets against Israel indiscriminately, and Israel engaging in massive retaliation in an air and ground offensive which killed more than 1,800 Palestinians, and in which subsequently more than 60 Israelis died. I think that sort of level of condemnation will dissipate with time, but I do think there is a growing recognition that it's high time that this problem was settled, and it ultimately, Owen, there's not a military solution to this problem. Israel has already engaged in these sort of ground and air offensives against the Gaza Strip. It's a disaster. This is a major humanitarian disaster. Between $4 and $6 billion worth of collateral damage in Gaza. Their only power station knocked out. The reality of life for the majority of Palestinians who are not active members of Hamas, they're just trying to make an existence. The reality of their life has been reduced massively. 40% of the population in Gaza Strip do not have a job anyway. And we have to look at this. We have to consider the interests of Palestinians beyond Hamas. And ultimately, there is no military solution to the problems which separate the Israelis and the Palestinians. There has to be a political initiative. And I think on that front, if Mr. Netanyahu thinks that just pulverizing Gaza is going to solve the problems, I think he will have to think again. Because unfortunately, those high level of civilian casualties will only breed another cycle of hatred and make the job of the political solution, which is so desperately required, even more difficult.
That's an interesting point. That level of casualty is only going to breed another generation of it. If we look at another aspect, sorry. So
I was just saying, yes, another generation of potential militants.
But if we look at such things as the so-called wonderful treaties that are signed for peace, then we get another generation along that doesn't like what's in that treaty, and that starts all over again.
Are you referring to
not just this case, but any case where we've had peace treaties in the past? Let's go back to what happened after World War I, for example. I don't like this peace treaty, said a little fella, and they started all over again.
Well, you're quite right in the sense, Owen, that there are always people who reject a particular solution to a problem. But ultimately, I think the majority opinion can play a role. One of the things that's been lost in the narrative about this crisis, Hamas keep getting described as terrorists. They are terrorists, but notice they're not global terrorists. They're using terrorism locally, and they're doing it to try to win self-determination. Now, we may say, it's misguided. This is not the way to end the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and reduce the Israeli siege of the Gaza Strip. It's totally inappropriate, I'm certainly it is. It's counterproductive, but they're not engaging in trying to blow up locations in New York or New Zealand or Australia. They're not Al-Qaeda. And what we should note is that many countries, before they get statehood, do engage in precisely what might be described as terrorist activities.
And then we get the former owners coming back and saying, we want you back. Ukraine. I'll say no more. Robert Patman, I thank you as always for your time today.
Thank you.
Coming up, 21 minutes to TN Radio Dunedin. Now, in just a moment or so, the music of Katie Marua. It's very, very nice. Whole lot of bicycles in Beijing. And then we're into our anniversary calls.
Yogi at City Auto Glass knows life is a picnic basket full of surprises. Like this.
What do you mean, fail? It's a wheat chip in the window.
Can't get a warrant till you fix it.